Hey, Christy here from loomingcraftyfiberarts. Today I want to teach you how to loom knit my new stitch called the Posy Twist Stitch. This stitch is a 6-row repeat. It needs to be loomed on an even pegged loom divisible by 2. And this is for flat panel only for now. I named it the Posy Twist Stitch because to me it looked like little flowers here, possibly, or buds of some kind. Here, 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 and it goes up. It's a very textured ribbing type stitch, and they look like they twist. The little posies look like they twist. So that's how it got its name. This was done in a DK yarn on a 3/8 gauge loom, but today I'm going to be showing you the stitch on a 1/2 gauge loom with a number 4 weight of yarn. So, like I said, you can do any cast on you wish. I did a garter stitch, which is 1 row E-wraps, 1 row purls. Now we're going to move on to row 1, and I'm going to slip the end pegs. They're not part of the pattern. It's just to show you what the stitch pattern is going to be. You can use any edging or border that you want. That's up to you. But I'm just going to show you from here to here is the stitch, and this is just going to be used as turning pegs. Okay? Alrighty. So row 1, we're going to be slipping from peg 1 to peg 2, and this whole row is going to be purl overs. Okay? So I'm going to do a few, and then I'll explain how you do a purl over. This video might be a little bit longer. If you are familiar and you just want to write this down, each row, you can skip ahead to the next row. If you're familiar with my stitches. If you're not, you really should watch the whole video. Okay, now I'm going to explain a few here. To do a purl over, the original purl over is a flat knit where you lay your yarn across. I don't do that. I do most of mine with an E-wrap. So we're just going to be coming from our last peg, E-wrapping around from the back, around to the front, which is an E-wrap. Then we're going to scoop up from the bottom, our loop at the bottom. We're going to take our hook and pull that loop down and flip it over back on the peg, and then snug it up. Okay, so let's do it again. E-wrap around, up from the bottom, pull that loop down, and you can kind of, to keep it from popping off like it did on this one a little while ago, kind of keep your finger down there and don't snug it too tight. You want to just kind of hug that peg. Okay, you don't want to squeeze it to death. You want gentle hugs. Because if you knit it too tight, it will be too hard to flip your loops over or knit your loops or whatever you're going to be doing for the next row. Okay. This is a good stitch to practice tensioning with, because if you get too tight, you won't be able to flip those loops over the next row. And I'm just going to U-wrap that because I'm slipping it, so I'm just going to U-wrap it, and that will give you a chain edge if you like a chain edge. Okay, row 2. I'm looking at my notes, so we're going to wrap 2 pegs as one, but pay attention because this is not like my regular stitches, so those of you that might be writing this down, pay attention to this. We're doing it a little bit different. We're going to wrap them as one. Just like this. We're coming from this peg, this is row 2, around the back, around the front, and y'all are familiar with this if you follow me much, most of my stitches. And then we're going to knit the peg that's closest to your working yarn. So this is your working yarn, you've wrapped around, so we're going to knit this one right here because it's closest to your working yarn right here. So we're going to knit it over, and then we're going to pull it in front, but instead of purling one loop, we're going to purl both, just like this. Okay, Now if I look a little awkward, I've got my camera boom over here to my right, so it's a different positioning for my camera and I'm not used to it. So knit that, take your working yarn, just like you do with one loop, in between those two pegs after you've knit this one, and then purl those two loops as one. So basically what you're doing is, where a lot of my patterns or stitches, I wrap two as one, knit both pegs off, and then pull my working yarn in between and purl that loop on that second peg. You're doing the same thing. You're just knitting the one closest to your working yarn and then purling the second peg with two loops instead of one loop. Okay, so we're going to come from this set of two here around the back around the front, knit this one, it's closest to my working yarn right here. Then we're going to take it and lay in between those two pegs and purl those two loops as one. Okay, that's the way you do it. So I'm going to finish this row. Like I said, this one may be a little bit longer than usual, and you can skip ahead if you wish. Purl two loops as one, wrap two as one, knit the first peg closest to your working yarn in between the pegs toward you, and purl the two pegs as one, and then you wrap that last peg. Okay, so now we're at row 3. Row 3 is going to be exactly like row 1, all purl overs. So you can skip on to row 4 if you know how to do purl overs. If you don't, you can watch me do these. I could fast forward this, but I'm not going to, because there is 6 rows here, and if somebody is wanting to learn these stitches, they can watch my technique and how I do them. Okay, so now we're gonna, you wrap around, scoop up from the bottom, pull that top loop down, flip it over the peg, and softly snug it up, just like that. And we're going to U-wrap the last peg. Okay. Now, row 4. We're going to do the regular stitch that I do a lot of times. We're going to go to the, we'll slip this peg, go to these 2 pegs, wrap around. We're going to knit 1, 2, just 1 loop here. And we're going to put our working yarn in between and purl the second peg. Okay, so wrap 2, knit, knit, purl, two, purl. So we're coming from these 2 again, around the back side, wrap around the front as 1, knit 1, knit 2, and my loop fell. This is a common complaint sometimes with these pegs on the KB, is that your yarn pops off the pegs. I have found it to be worse with acrylic than blends or wool, but and we're going to come around. I'll knit them both. And we're going to purl the second peg. And yes, we have a storm coming up. If you heard that thunder, I don't know if you heard that or not. Okay, and this is the last one. Really having trouble with these pegs today. And purl. And U-wrap. Okay. All right. Now we're at, that was row 4. Now we're at row 5. Now we're going to slip this peg. We're going to wrap this peg twice. Okay. And then we're going to purl all 3 pegs as one. So don't wrap that peg too tight. Wrap it loosely. Just kind of hug it as you're wrapping it around. Put your hook down through all 3 loops. Put your yarn underneath those 3 loops, your working yarn. Pull it up to make a new loop. Take all 3 of your loops off and put your new loop back on. Now when you do this, you're going to see what I see right here is those 3 loops are going to set in between your pegs. You haven't done anything wrong. It's not going to stay that way. When you purl your second peg, and that's what we're going to do, we're purling 3 as one, then we're purling the single loop by itself. It will push those loops back behind. See, it pushes them behind, so they're no longer wedged all in there. Okay, let's do that again. Wrap our peg twice. Pull your yarn around to purl. Stick your hook down in between all 3 loops. We're going to purl as one. Pull that bottom loop up. Take all 3 off. Put your new loop back on. And see, it's pushing it forward. And then we're just going to purl the second peg. Now, if you do happen to be a little bit too tight of a knitter and you start to purl and you get your loop up and you start to pull these over and it's too tight, what you can do is you can do 1 loop or 2 loops, and then the last one you can divide them up and kind of push them over a little at a time. But I don't suggest doing it from the middle. I suggest doing it from the side over here. If you do it from the middle, you're going to push them up this purl stitch, and they may, depending on how far you get your purl stitch, you could lose them and have to do it all over again. So we don't want to do that. So let's just take them over here at the side. There's 2. We're going to knit them over, and this one over here at the side, and knit it over. And then put your loop on, and then snug it up. And you've got your little, what I call a pigtail. It's a coil, a pigtail. I call it a pigtail. Okay, so we're going to do that again. 3 loops, purl as one, and purl the second peg, that 1 loop. So that's the repeat for this row. Again, I'll do that to show you again if you are a little bit of a too tight a knitter and you have trouble getting that over. Let's just do 1 this time. Let's just have 1 loop over. Make sure you hold on to your purl loop up here. Next loop over. Next loop over. And then put your new loop on. And see, it'll just tighten those up like they're supposed to be. And then purl. Of course, now if you get in a rhythm, you'll be going a lot faster than I am. Okay. So here we are at the end of row 5. I'm going to purl this one. Push all that back behind there. You wrap that one. And there's row 5. Row 6. This is your last row. 6-row repeat. We're going to do my classic wrap 2, knit the 2 pegs off, purl the second peg. So if you're writing this down, you know my sequence of stuff, then you can end the video if you wish. If not, you can continue to watch me knit. Okay, so wrap 2, knit both pegs, yarn in front, in between those pegs, and purl. I'm going to have to move my camera back a little bit because my elbow's hitting it and it's making it awkward for me for my next video. Yarn's hung in my pegs. I'm kind of fumbly today, aren't I? Sorry about that. Okay, now that's your 6 rows. And I've already done a few rows, so you can see how this looks on a half gauge. It's a little bit lacier actually with a number 4 weight. So you can kind of play around with your gauges and your yarn weights. Like this is a half gauge, you could use a 5 on it, or a 4. If you do use a 5, it's going to be a little tighter. So that depends on what you're looking for. One thing I want to mention before I go. If you do use a 5, you may not want to on row 5, where you wrap the peg twice and then purl all 3 loops as one. You may want to try wrapping the peg once and purl 2 loops as one. It may be too thick for a 5 to do 3 loops as one. You can play with it. I give you permission to do that because you don't want it to be so bulky that it's just a mess, you know. So that's what you're going to get. And that is the Posy Twist Stitch. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. And please don't forget to subscribe and like and share this video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.